This video covers a DIY approach to replacing the fore and aft front subframe bushes on a Ford Kuga Mk1.
I have a ball joint splitter kit that I think I bought on eBay for something like 24-25 quid. And I've taken bits out of it, some of these bits and pieces, and made a bush extractor and installer. So 2 bits out of the bearing or the ball joint kit that I am using are this bit, which just sits on top of what is essentially a piece of pipe, but it's out of the kit, so that sits on top of it. I then have a couple of old bearing races. You can see the inner is slightly less diameter than the main outside diameter, so that sits in there quite nicely. So I can extend this cup section, if you like, by using these extra bearings. The other thing that you'll probably need is a piece of, well, I'm using 20mm threaded rod, 7 inches long, something like that, and washer and a couple of nuts. So I'm just going to go through what bolt you need to loosen to access the subframe bushes. So first of all, jack the car up, make sure you have axle stands in, take the front wheels off, remove this bolt, I think it's 22mm, loosen one of these, remove the other one, and spin this plate round out of the way. Do the same on the other side. If you come forward to the A-arm, so that's the A-arm, that's the wheel end, that's the ball joint. Working back from the ball joint, you'll see a hole, and if you look up through that hole, you'll see a 15mm bolt there. Again, loosen that off. You need to take it out if you're doing the front bushes. Leave it in if you're doing the back bushes, but loosen it off so that the subframe's free to move on that. Do the same on the other side. And the final bolt you need to loosen, I just took it out, is this one, which is part of the gearbox mount. It attaches the gearbox mounting to the subframe, so just take that one out altogether. If you're doing the rear subframe mounts, take these larger bolts out, remove them totally. Whenever you're doing the front subframe bushes, put them in, don't tighten them, but make sure they're in 3 or 4 threads anyway. When you're doing the front subframe bushes, do the opposite. If you're still finding it difficult to manipulate the subframe, I'm looking from the front of the car, there is the ball joint, working back up the A-arm. You'll see a bolt here, there's one on each side, and this attaches the steering rack to the subframe, so you may want to loosen these bolts or take them out altogether as well. It'll give you more free play in the subframe. So I've got the bearing out of this side, or the bush out of this side. As you can see, that's where it goes. I've wedged the subframe down just by using that's actually a scissor jack. So we've loosened the bolts off on the subframe and I can wedge them down, so I just need to install that bush. Just to give you a better idea of how the extractor tool worked, if you can imagine the bush up inside the extractor tool, this face then sits against the top of the subframe, and whenever you tighten this bolt, it pushes the bush up out of the hole that it sits into, and you just keep tightening until you can pop it out. So I've found this, it's effectively a thick washer. You could probably use anything you have lying around that resembles that. And I'm going to put that on top of the bush just to give me a straight pull down into the correct hole. Okay, if you hear growling, it's not me. My dogs are in here behind me. So I'm just going to show you how I installed this bush. So got the bush sitting on top of the hole, threaded rod up through it, and threaded rod through the washer I'm using at the top. Okay, and I want a nut on there. Screw the threaded rod just up through the nut, doesn't really matter how much, but just so it's through the top of the nut. And so this is one of the parts out of the ball joint separator kit, and I just put this chamfered face into the hole, sort of centers it quite well. Stick a washer on there so it doesn't damage the face of that, and second nut on the bottom. So this is the hard bit, trying to centralize the bush. You want to make sure that around this edge is even the whole way around. You might need to turn it slightly to get that to happen. And I'm going to see if this works. So as I tighten, okay, the nut on the top's turning. This is starting to go at a bit of an angle, so I might need to stop and adjust. I'll try pulling it on for now. So I just pulled it on there, and it seems to have straightened itself. I'm going to get two hands at this, and I'll show you when it's finished. Okay, so I've tightened in enough now that the bush itself is hitting the top side of this. I can't tighten it anymore basically, so I'm going to have to take the nut off and put some sort of spacer in there to allow the bush down into the hole more until it gets to the shoulder where it needs to go to. So I'll loosen that off and put a spacer in there. So you can see what I've done there. I've added the this cylindrical part as a spacer, and that's one of the parts out of the ball joint extraction kit. So the bush should be able to go down into the hole it needs to go to nicely now. So I'll do that and let you see the results. Okay, so that's it installed. We're down to the shoulders, down to the line, so we can't go any further. Just going to take it off. So you can see the bush in place. It's down through the hole where it needs to go to, and that's the front rear bushes and the subframe installed. So as you can see, subframe's quite loose there, it's just hanging on the front bolts. So with the rear bushes installed, I need to put the back bolts that go up through here, back in again, and I'll not install them very tight, I'll just leave them loose so the subframe can hang on them, and I can release the bolts for the upper bushes. So that's me roughly back in place. And now I can install my bolt up through and into the bush. So I've just left these bolts loose so the subframe can hang off them whenever I'm doing the front ones. That's what the top subframe bushes look like before we replace them. So you can see the cracks and splits around the edges, and that's what's creating the knocking noise when the car goes over bumps.
Due to the shape of the housing, I couldn't get the press tool onto the upper bushes, so I had to go to plan B.
I'm going to remove the press tool now. I've removed all the plastic from the top of the bush, and now I'm going to apply some heat. So I've got a MAP gas burner, but any sort of heat gun, something capable of melting the plastic should suffice. So I'm going to get the vice grips on that and turn it and work with it until it comes out. So you can see that it's starting to loosen now with the vice grips. So the next thing I'm going to do is use a long bolt and bring that up through. There's a hole in the A-arm directly below the bush. I'm going to bring the long bolt up and just hammer the bottom of it so that it presses the bush upwards. So as you can see, I've heated it a few times now. Plastic's quite soft, and it's quite easy now to hit the bush from the bottom with the bolt I'm using, and it's nearly out, so I'll just finish it off. So I've hit it enough, I think it should come out now. Yep, there it comes. And that's the bit that comes out. So just have to hit all this plastic off. I'm going to use my hammer and chisel for that and just clean all that up. Okay, the rest of it should pull out quite easily. So that's the hole. I'm just going to clean that up with some emery paper and just apply a bit of grease to it. Set up for this side. Got the threaded bar, big washer, a few washers below that, and then a nut. We've got the bush, lithium grease on to aid its entry, and up top I've just got another washer and a nut. I've got a ratchet spanner here which helps. Okay, threaded rod's starting to turn on me, so I'm just going to put the vice grips on it. Okay, it's starting to bottom out now, so I need to put my spacer on in here so the bush can pull down into the spacer. So we'll set up for the final pull. That's the bush installed now. So I've got my nut and washer on top of the bush. Threaded bar down through a cup. And the purpose of the cup is that the bottom of the bush...
I had to use 12mm threaded bar instead of the 20 for the upper bush.
It doesn't bottom out when you're pulling it through. I've got a washer in the bottom there, and a nut on the bottom of the washer, and that's the nut that I tighten to pull the bush down through. So take the setup away. That's the bush in place, and that's it. So everything's tightened and in place. You can see the rear bushes in place and tightened up, and there's one of the front bushes tightened up with the bolts on, and ready to put the wheels back on, and car's fixed and ready to go.